and thank you for joining us on the very first podcast of the Rio Grande Valley Business Journal, where we explore the people, ideas, and opportunities shaping our region. I'm Naxiely Lopez, the managing editor and your host for today. And today we have our publisher, my boss, and the mayor of Edinburg, Ramiro Garza. Welcome, Ramiro.
Thank you.
So, Ramiro, we have just launched this exciting new venture, the Rio Grande Valley Business Journal. Talk to me a little bit about it.
Yeah, it's very exciting. You know, it's I think something that we need here in our area. You know, this journal is going to talk about and write about all that is happening here in our region, all in our 4-county area from Cameron, Willacy, Hidalgo, and Star, and then the northern part of Mexico. So important. We often get defined by others, whether it's because of politics or what is happening on the national level that we're talked about, but it's not always talked about what really is happening here from a business standpoint. And so I think that's why the journal is important. I think we are probably one of the only areas around the country with 1 million people or more that does not have a business journal, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's important because it covers all that is happening in our region. It covers different sectors. We're not just an agricultural-based economy anymore. We've evolved. And I think it's important that we tell our story, and that's what the journal will do.
Right. And so I think it's important for people to know that this is not going to be a publication that focuses just on Edinburgh, right? You're synonymous with Edinburgh.
Yeah.
You've been leading one of the fastest growing cities in the state.
Correct.
And, so talk to me about that transition from deciding to, take off the mayor hat and become a publisher for a new publication.
I know, it's running a city to now running a newsroom, right? But what it is I've always had a passion for news, okay, in particular. I've always followed it. I'm not a journalist by trade. I come from a business background. But, it's information is everything, keeping up with what's happening. And so the transition, obviously, it's going to be a challenge in that we will probably, explore, like I said, new things for me because, I'm so used to, working at City Hall and then doing my business development activities. But this is something that I've been passionate about, wanting to do for some time. Mm-hmm. With the work that I do on a day-to-day basis, aside from the city, I work with real estate development projects throughout the region. And so always have data, available, but it's I wanted to make sure that we have it in one area. And I think that's what the journal allows us to do. So my transition has been, interesting, coming from, serving a city to now, but this journal is going to cover the whole region. I have a passion, not just for our city, but for our whole region. I've always been an advocate for working together as one region. And ever since I started in economic development, I was born in Brownsville and, I've lived in Edinburgh now more than half my life, raised in Port Isabel. But, I love our valley like a lot of us do. I always feel like, why can't we have some of the same opportunities that others have elsewhere? And so I think that's what our journal is going to do. It's going to highlight, all the things that are happening in our region. And it's not just going to be, only positive things. It's going to be whatever the news is,
right.
We're going to cover it. And so I'm so looking forward to that.
And so you mentioned something that I think is really important for our subscribers and potential subscribers to learn, right? The data. Unlike a traditional publication, we're adding a different component. Talk to us about that data and what people can expect from our website.
Sure. So the data is going to be a link inside the site, right, of the Business Journal. And it's going to be a site that you click on and you'll have access to the latest demographics in the area. Mm-hmm. Not the latest, but really just our demographics of our 4-county area. But then the latest economic indicators, the trends that are happening here. Mm-hmm. It'll start with our general census population information to households, our growth in our area. And it'll be by city. It'll be the 4-county areas and by each city. We have now, I think, 47 cities with the newest Starbase, right? So it's going to have that. But then it's going to have these economic trends talking about our sales tax, the trends that we're seeing, and they're going to be updated, as they're made available by the publicly available. Sales tax, for example, is the comptroller's office. They issue a report out every month. So as those come out, it will have, building permits, labor market information. So that data is going to be key, and there's a lot of interest in our area. There's been a lot of growth, but I feel that, if an investor wants to invest, it knows where they're going to invest in a particular city. That's great because they could just go to that city and get the information they need. But there's a lot of people that are just evaluating our area. Where do you go to get data for the whole area in one area? And so that's what this journal will have. This data is going to be available for subscribers, that for them to be a part of it, and they'll be able to access it, print out information on one city or one county or the whole region.
And data is king, right? That's how investors figure out where to put their money, where to invest, and so that really is going to be very key to our audience.
It is. The other thing that why it's important is a lot of our other larger metro areas, whether you're talking about Dallas-Fort Worth area, the greater Phoenix area, other areas around the country, they're what you call surveyed markets, right? In the real estate corporate world, they're surveyed by third parties, meaning there's data collected because there's such a large metro area that third party, companies go in there and survey the market and get information on the market, whether it's leasing rates, whether it's sales info for that market. The Valley, we're a non-surveyed area, okay? And all that means is that there's no information available as there is in other areas.
Right. And I guess it's challenging too, right?
Correct.
Because we have 48 different cities.
Correct.
And they all, store their data differently. And
Correct.
so in order to collect all of this, I can imagine it's going to be a challenge, but also a boon to our subscribers.
Absolutely, and to everyone that wants to do business here in our region. It's just about making it easier for folks to invest here in our region. If they're going to invest in other areas that are surveyed, there's a lot of information available because they're being surveyed. Their data is readily available. But here, it's not, right, collectively like that. There's folks that have different data available, but not in a unified way, and that's what this is going to help with. The idea here is to make it easier, like I said, for investors, businesses, or even existing businesses that are looking to expand, that they have this information readily available.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of expanding, what are some of the trends that you have seen in investment, at least in Edinburg? What have you seen?
Well, again, just looking at it overall from Edinburg and the whole Valley, I mean, one of the things that people think about when they think of the Valley, they see us as still an agricultural-based economy. We still much are. That's part of our economy, but that's not all of what our economy is made of anymore. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's, SpaceX that is here in Cameron County. You've got technology companies that are here in Edinburgh, in particular in McAllen, Zoho, that is expanding. I mean, who would have thought that software engineers can come get employment just right here instead of leaving the area? And then healthcare. I mean, a fourth of our employment is tied to healthcare, which is double the national average. The national average is 12%. So here is about 25% of everyone employed here is tied to healthcare. That didn't used to be the case many years ago. Now with the School of Medicine, our hospital systems that are here that are expanding, it's big. The banking sector. I mean, there's now so much available, so many options, access to capital with the different banks that, people can now rely on. But so, there's been a lot of changes in our market and our economy. And those are some of the things that we're going to be exploring with the Business Journal.
Wonderful. Okay. All right. Across the county, we've seen local journalism shrink. I'm sorry, I'm going to say that again. Across the country, we've seen local journalism shrink. We've seen it in our own backyard. Why is it so important for people in the RGV to support and to subscribe to this publication?
Well, number one, it's important because the Valley is not a known area as other areas around the country in terms of let's say just in general, right? People, when I go somewhere, I have to tell them, I had to describe 2 or 3 things before they understand where we're located. And so we're always at a disadvantage in terms of where we're actually located and for people to know who we are. And so it's just so important for people. This journal, I think, is going to help highlight, our area and to keep up. And so why people should subscribe is because this is the only way you're going to be able to keep up with what is happening. Right now, you can keep up in a number of ways. You can call people, you can go online and just do your searches and maybe look for press releases or things that are happening. This is going to be one area where you can get access to where things are being developed, what new businesses are opening up, what the latest trends are in our area. You'll be equipped to not only be able to make better decisions for your business, to expand, but also for investors to know perhaps where to invest and keep up with what is happening. So I think those are the reasons why it's important. There's a lot happening in our area. I like to say that almost in every part of our region here in the Valley, there's probably 10, 15 stories. And we've seen that, right, with some of the stories that are now coming out because there's so much happening in our area. But we need to, tell our story. We need to publicize it and share what is happening in our region. That's what this journal is going to do.
And, you mentioned something that we're in a very strategic location. Mm-hmm. And, given everything that's going on right now, we are at the border, right? We are a binational area. We don't live separate from the other border. We interact, we do commerce, we have families, and there's so much to explore in our binationalism.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's what makes us very unique. Our geographic location. Yes, there's a river that runs, that kind of divides the countries. But we're a binational economy. When you look at, some of the companies that are in, for example, Reynosa or Matamoros, they're not located, American companies, they're not located there by themselves. They probably have a warehouse on the U.S. side. They probably have some HR or R&D operation on the U.S. side. The labor-intensive operations is more on the Mexican side, but there's other operations that make up that company. Mm-hmm. And so that's what makes up makes our economy work here in our region. People come shop here, from across Mexico. They cross here, but a lot of what happens in our area from a business standpoint, it works both ways. So binational economy, there's so much that we depend on each other. It's almost like it's one area. That's why our trade area is 3 million people, even though there's, over 1.5 million here on the U.S. side. Conservatively, there's another 1.5 million. I think it's a little bit more than that, but it's 3 million people. I like to say, in Austin area, Lake Travis, it's kind of like including just the north side, Lake Travis, and not the south side or the other way. You got to include the whole market. That's what makes up our market. If you go to the mall or any shopping area here, I always tell people, just look at their license plates. It's not just folks that are here from the U.S. We have Mexican nationals that are crossing to shop here. That's what makes our economy work here.
And that's a very good point, because we are actually going to have a dedicated reporter in Mexico covering Matamoros, Reynosa, covering that side of the sector, mm-hmm. which, I feel like we don't get enough of the business news from that area, even though we work so closely together. And so talk to me about that idea of having a reporter in Mexico involved in this business journal.
Absolutely. It's very important because, like I said, like I was describing, it's you can't just cover one side and think you're covering the whole area. Okay. And so we felt like it was important that we have a dedicated reporter covering the Mexican side, because there's so much going on the Mexican side that affects the Rio Grande Valley, and from a business standpoint. All we hear right now is non-business news, right, of things that are happening on the border. But there's a lot of business activity that happens on the Mexican side that affects the RGV. We have industrial parks out there. We have, Fortune 50 companies that are located just across the river from us, and vice versa, companies that are here that do business on Mexico. And so, we thought it was so important because telling the Rio Grande Valley story includes the northern part of Mexico.
Right. Okay, and switching gears a little bit, you've been invited to join the Texas Tribune to talk about the economy in the Rio Grande Valley in an upcoming event. What does that say about, the Valley at a statewide stage?
Look, the Valley, we've come a long way. Rio Grande Valley, we're now talked about more. And again, I know we said, because of immigration, other political reasons, but you really, from a business standpoint, you see all the franchises here, those are national franchises. That means that corporate America has evaluated our area and they've decided that, hey, we need to expand into that market. So, the Texas Tribune is doing an event down here where they're featuring, they're calling it the RGV, I believe, Economic Miracle. All that's happened here and how it's contributing greatly to not only the Texas economy, but our U.S. economy. When you look at all the ports of entry that we have here, all the goods and products that are crossed, that we all consume, that we all use, it is a tremendous impact that it has on our region. I just saw that Cameron County just got a new permit to expand into a new bridge.
Right,
pedestrians. I always like to say we need more, bridges. That's what we need, more investment on the border. And in this particular case, Cameron County is doing that. But we've seen it here in Hidalgo County. We've seen it in Stark County. It's so important. So I think Texas Tribune is wanting to, just feature and highlight the valley and what is happening. I'm, happy to go on stage and share all that is happening here.
Wonderful. All right. So if you could leave Austin policymakers with one message about the economy here in the valley, what would it be?
Well, two things. One, we're no longer just an agriculture-based economy, right? That there's other sectors, other industries that are here that make up the Rio Grande Valley. But number two is that we're a fast-growing area and we deserve the same level of investments that other parts of the state. I think that's the key because we still have a lot of needs. On the transportation side, we're still the only area with over 1 million people without an interstate that connects us from the valley to the northern part. There really isn't. The interstate goes and stops north of Edinburg, north of Willacy County, and then it becomes a U.S. highway, and then it connects eventually to an interstate. But there's a gap. And so to me, that needs to be focused on. And it has been. There's been a lot of investments in that, but it's got to be completed. It's that's so important for business because when our local companies bid on projects or let's say they're producing a component, right, to a manufacturing operation. When they have to price and bid to be able to manufacture that here, it's more expensive because they're having to travel to a U.S. highway north of us. Okay, if it's an interstate system, it's a nonstop, then it's a more competitively priced proposal. But because of where we're located, we're not connected to a nonstop interstate highway. It costs more in their bidding. And so it'll help us tremendously from a business standpoint. But more important than anything, it just shows that, hey, we're also part of not only the state, but, Texas, but the country. We should be connected too, just like everywhere else around the country.
Okay. Now, what's the value proposition for your subscribers? What are they going to find here at the Rio Grande Valley Business Journal that they're not going to find anywhere else?
Well, they're going to get the latest business news that is happening 100% on this journal. We're not going to cover politics. We're not going to cover crime, law enforcement. There's nothing wrong with covering that, but this is 100% focus on business activity here in the Rio Grande Valley. You're going to get to know, all that is happening, not just in general business news, but in different sectors. And we're going to cover residential construction, all that is happening, the latest home building numbers, the latest that is happening, the latest commercial real estate activity. There's so much going on with, you see all the shopping centers being built, right? All throughout the region. What impact does it have in our area? What does that mean? And then we're going to cover, industrial activity, logistics, all the bridge crossings that are happening, healthcare, banking, all that makes up, the economy of the Rio Grande Valley. But then we have the data. The data is going to be so important because people will be able to access information on what is actually happening, what the trends are. This business journal is not something completely new that doesn't exist anywhere around the country. There's, similar publications and probably 44 other, areas around our country that if somebody's looking to invest in those areas, they just go there and get a good pulse of what is happening in our area. And that's what the business journal is going to do.
Okay. If we fast forward 10 years, what does success look like for the RGV? And what role do you hope the Rio Grande Valley Business Journal has played in getting us there?
That's a very good question. I would say that 10 years from now, based on the growth that we're having and all the advances we're seeing on the educational front in terms of the merger of the university, they just completed 10 years. Now in 10 years it'll be 20 years. So I would say having more doctors, more of our workforce that is trained, that new businesses came here tied to those industries, I would say that'd be a huge success because it'll help us continue to diversify, right? I think for me, 10 years from now, we could see, let's say a larger percentage of employment now in technology sector, in higher paying jobs. To me, that's what I would classify a success, because I think that's how our economy could just continue improving, how we can raise the standard of living here for our region by having those higher paying jobs. And for me, the Business Journal, I think, will be right along with that, covering what is happening, promoting those things, that workforce that gets trained. Well, we need to tell the world about that. I think the Business Journal can do that. How many engineers are graduating from here? How many software, engineers are coming out of our university? Different trained professionals so that we can attract industry here. And I look forward for the journal collaborating with other regional efforts and recruiting business. Not that the journal's going to do that, but what I mean is we'll have all the facts and the data to provide those involved with recruitment or expansion. And I think we could, definitely partner with them to ensure that the Valley and Northern Mexico, we put our best foot forward in terms of what is available here so that people really take a look at us for those investments.
Wonderful. And, you've taken a big personal risk in launching this. Talk to me a little bit about that, the personal side. What made you say, hey, I want to invest my money in this idea?
I've been always, even though I may not seem like that, but I've always been a little bit of a risk taker. I've worked in city government for many years. I worked in the Edinburg in particular for 15 years. I used to be the economic development director, and then I used to be city manager. And I remember thinking about the question you just asked me when I left city management. I was making a salary. I was good. I had a young family, and I thought, I wanted to go into the business world. And so I went from, a salary to, opening a business. In my case at the time, I was started doing consulting right when I left city management. And so I've always, been a little bit of a risk taker. I really, in terms of this particular case, why starting a business journal, and risking that, is I really believe in it. I really believe in our area. I'm very passionate about the Rio Grande Valley. As I mentioned earlier, we can compete with just about anybody, but I feel that we're not telling our complete story collectively. And I think that's what this journal is going to do. And so, I even though it may seem like a risk, I don't see it as a risk. I see so much interest in this, so much support. I've talked to so many people, everybody that I know that I've talked to has shown great interest in terms of having something like this. And so, yes, it is a risk, but I think it's one worth taking if it means, putting the Rio Grande Valley in the best position possible for it to succeed further.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to add, Ramiro, that perhaps I didn't ask?
Well, just like people to subscribe, because that's the only way to really keep up and to know, and then get people's feedback. I mean, we've built this site already, but if, people out there see that we should add things that could make it even more viable, hey, this is a business. This is one of those things where if there's a way we can improve the experience for people to utilize it, by all means. This is not, like I said, something new, completely new. There's other similar publications. I mean, if there's something we need to highlight or focus on in terms of data or anything else, I'm happy to hear it. Let us know, and we're happy to look into that.
Right. That's definitely true. It's a two-way street. We want to hear from you. If you're doing something great, innovative, we want to invite you to send us your tips, send us your story ideas. If you have data, send it our way. You can see it up on the screen right now, info@rgvbusinessjournal.com. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you next week.